right, what is matter? Do you matter? Of course you do, but we're talking about matter in terms of science. So we are going to start hopefully explaining some of the things that we've been seeing in the labs and in our phenomena. So today your objective is that you can understand how physical and chemical properties can describe matter. So matter is anything with mass and volume. So basically that's anything and everything around you. Everything that you can see, touch, feel, taste, whatever it is matter. So real quick as a review, hopefully, mass is how much stuff is in something. So the amount of, I just say stuff for right now. We'll learn more about it later. In something. And then volume is how much space something takes up. So your mass is not going to change if you go to another planet, for instance, because you're still having the same amount of stuff. You're still made up of the same amount of stuff. Okay, so that's basically what matter is. It's anything around you. But we describe it using physical and chemical properties. So properties are just like characteristics that describe. So, for example, I might say that my t-shirt is soft. Or I might say that the water is clear or something like that. But there's a difference between physical and chemical properties. And the difference is that physical do not require a change in the substance when you are testing them. So again, physical, there's no change when you're testing to see the physical properties. But chemical properties, on the other hand, sorry, I ran out of room. Chemical properties, on the other hand, they do change the substance. And once we go through some of these other pieces of this presentation, that'll make more sense. Matter can be described using physical properties and chemical properties. First, we're going to focus on the physical properties that describe matter. So first of all, you can describe matter using the appearance. So that's as simple as talking about the color, the texture, the smell, taste, right? So these are just like normal things that you might observe when you're looking at something. Density is another physical property that can be used to describe matter. So density, if you look at this picture over here, this really is describing how tightly packed the particles are in a substance. So density is actually something you might have learned before as a math problem. So density equals mass divided by volume. So you can find the density of an object by taking the mass divided by the volume. And we'll learn more about that later. So here in this picture, you can see how all these little dots, these particles, they're all really tightly packed together. So we would say that this has a high density. Another physical property is solubility. Again, that's solubility. So sometimes we say that when we describe properties, we say that they're soluble or insoluble. So things that are soluble, they will dissolve in water. So you should have seen this in the lab that you did before. Things that dissolved in water, we call those soluble. Insoluble, I bet you can guess what that means based on what soluble means, but insoluble means it cannot dissolve in water. So think about what Kool-Aid would be. Kool-Aid, if you said soluble, you're correct, right? Because Kool-Aid, when you put it in your water, it dissolves, makes you Kool-Aid. Okay, so some more physical properties that can describe matter are melting point, boiling point, and viscosity. So the melting point is the temperature at which a substance changes from a solid to a liquid. So different substances have different melting points. Chocolate is going to melt at a different temperature than water or ice. And maybe like a piece of plastic would melt at a totally different temperature than even those things. Boiling point is the temperature at which a substance changes from, so when something's boiling, right, it's changing from a liquid to a gas. So the boiling point, again, is going to be different for different substances. Water has a different boiling point than oil, like cooking oil, or than like rubbing alcohol. So we can use this information to figure out what type of material we're working with. So if we had like an unknown liquid, you could figure out what type of a liquid it is based on its melting point, boiling point, maybe its density, and some of these other things we've been talking about. Also, viscosity. So this one is a cool one that you should have seen in your lab the other day. So viscosity is really how it's basically how quickly a liquid flows, but I like to think of it more as like the thickness of a liquid. So think of like Germ-X versus water, right? If you took a cup of water and poured it out, the water is going to flow out much faster, which is, again, how quickly it flows, than if you took a cup of Germ-X and poured it out. So that's a liquid's viscosity. Chemical properties, remember, require scientists or whoever's investigating the properties. It's going to make a change in the substance itself when you're testing its chemical properties. So, for example, flammability. This is basically just to see if the material will burn. So, if it burns, it's flammable. So, for example, wood is going to burn. And once it burns, it's no longer wood. It is now ashes. So that's why it's a chemical property because it's totally changed the substance that it is after it burns. Another chemical property is reactivity. So this is basically just the ability of the matter to combine with other substances. So can it combine chemically with other substances? So, for example, this picture right here, you've probably seen this substance before, but this is rust, right? And what happens with rust is the metal is combining chemically with oxygen that's in the air, and that's what forms the rust. So we say that the metal is reactive with oxygen. So it has high reactivity. So certain substances have higher and lower reactivities.